And now we just reached the next point in our schedule, which is a new roundtable session. It will discuss the role of research and innovation in advancing key strategies in European industry areas. The panelists will be Edina Németh, who has been working with EU research programs at the Hungarian National Research, Development and Innovation Office since 1999. I was graduated back then from high school, so she must have enormous expertise in the field. Maybe it will be useful for a grant application for you. Sean William Kennedy is a PhD both in mathematics and computer science. Quite impressive. From McGill University in Montreal, Canada. He is the head of Nokia Bell Labs Artificial Intelligence Research Group, and as I understood it correctly, he's interested in how we can stretch the limits of machine learning systems to mimic the human capacity of analytical thinking. Quite interesting. Massimo Busuoli will be with us online here. He is currently the director of the Brussels office of the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. Taking a look at his bio, he must have an extensive knowledge and expertise in EU project management and how European initiatives work. And the moderator of the session will be Domokos Esztergárkis. He's a senior lecturer at Budapest University of Technology and Economics. Welcome them on stage.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. So today we will talk about this role of the research innovation advancing case strategies in the European industry area, and we will have separate questions to each of the panel discussion participants. The first one will be Edina Németh, and the first question is: how has the European research funding landscape has been developed in the digital field, and what are the major trends and directions?
So compared to the previous European framework program, one of the major changes that we have seen is that the Commission has, together with the support of Member States, brought together the three areas that are really truly important for Europe: digital, industry, and space. And the consequences of this are that there's a strong push to increase multiple issues like the synergies among these areas, the digital transformation in all of these areas and even beyond the cluster, as well as the industrial relationships. So what we have seen is that the European Commission sort of consolidated previous partnerships. These partnerships are with industry and academic players, and these partnerships now form a key part, over 50% of the cluster 4 of Horizon Europe. These partnerships take different forms, but the main message is that the European Commission wants the framework program, wants the researchers, wants the industrial players to work together to address real industrial needs with digital technologies. And some of the partnerships that we can mention here that the Commission has launched in Horizon Europe include smart networks and services, key digital technologies, which they're actually even transforming due to the serious deficit in chips. So they're changing it into chips partnerships. There's also partnerships in photonics and many, many other areas that are directly digital or related to digital technology use in other areas.
Thank you very much. The first question goes then to William. How do you see the added value of university-industry cooperation in the field of AI, and how can the university and the industry cooperate effectively in advancing AI?
Thank you. So I think industries and universities need to work as a partner to advance both the field of AI together. I don't think that either entity can really do it alone. I think the most interesting work that exists out there is the work that exists at the intersection of scientific innovation. It's going after the deep challenges that need to be solved for the sake of humanity, and there's numerous that we can get into if you're curious. But these problems need to be relevant, right? They need to be relevant for humans, they need to be relevant for industries at large, and so I think the partnerships that we can build between industries and universities are really critical to advancing the field of artificial intelligence forward. I mean, otherwise, universities will tend to do very interesting scientific, but stray away from relevance, deep relevance, or things that will end up in people's pockets in the near future. And likewise, I mean, industries are sometimes too much driven by the pocketbooks, by their P&Ls, et cetera, right? So I think it's this path that runs down the center is so critical for developing things like AI, which are both critical research challenges, but also hugely important in the space of for humans, et cetera.
Thank you so much. Then I will ask Massimo from the car that how can research and innovation contribute to the objectives of the European industrial strategy? Do you see any changes in the funding landscape, and is the focus somehow shifting towards the European partnership or not that much?
Thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation and for giving me this challenging question. I would like to say, yes, there is, in my opinion, compared to the past, a change in the need of approaching the various instruments of the European Commission. There is a new challenge posed to universities, especially because you're right, currently the focus in trying to support the advancement of Europe in the field of innovation, especially, and the industrial agenda is basically supported by the strategic partnership. What is interesting in the strategic partnership is that compared to the past and to the previous framework program, today they are more open, and they're more open to the participation of stakeholders like universities and research entities. This poses on our side as universities the challenge to somehow organize ourselves in a way that we can definitely enter and have a solid voice in order to contribute together with the other in shaping the priorities and somehow aligning them with our capability also to develop the needed research to achieve the innovation objectives that the Commission is looking for. On the other side, I would like to say that the strategic partnership do not represent today the only initiative that can contribute in implementing the industrial strategy of Europe. Of course, they are among the main, because the industrial strategy points on aspects like raw materials, like hydrogen, like batteries that are opening, of course, some other problems, especially in the side of raw materials to produce batteries. But also, the Commission is currently working a lot in modernizing the university to impact on innovation aspects in all terms. And on this, I would like to consider that the strategic partnership are one of the universities that are looked to, because we don't have to forget the KICs that, for example, are currently coordinating the industry alliances that are part of it tries to relaunch the overall European system of the actors and the instruments that Europe has to use to achieve research and innovation objectives, in which a particular attention is given to the relaunch of the creation of a strong and interconnected innovation European system that basically in which the dots are represented by the so-called innovation clusters at regional level. So definitely the strategic partnership are an important aspect. Definitely the role of universities today is a bit more challenging compared to the past, because it requires an effort of a structured and institutional organization in entities that are known to be somehow, if you want, fragmented and based on the work of faculties and single professors. But don't forget the other aspects that Europe has in terms of initiatives linked to innovation.
Okay, so thank you very much. It was also very interesting about the KICs, which we may discuss later. But I have the second question to Edina. How do you see the role of the universities and research institutions from the widening region in joining the big major collaboration in the digital field?
Yes, so I think it's no secret that widening countries or countries that joined the EU at a later stage are not receiving as much support from the framework program as they could. And maybe there's some traditional reasons for that because there's predominant view that there's mostly research here and not enough industry. But I think it's time for Europe to notice that around the widening countries, we are making really significant investments in boosting academia-industry cooperation, in expanding the research infrastructure. The venue of this conference is a beautiful example of that. And this strengthened cooperation in widening countries is something that we need to exploit at a European level, because there hasn't been a time in the world when it's more important for Europe to boost collaboration and really make use of all the resources in every country around Europe. With that said, I think also it's important that the actors in the widening countries become not just more active in developing their infrastructure and collaborations, but also become more active in the strategic processes surrounding the framework program. For example, in the partnerships, every few years they develop the strategic research agendas of each area. And when actors are involved from the beginning, it means that they have more of a say and more of a chance to be there at the seed of project ideas and then grow it from there.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just add, I'm Canadian, and I'll add just a Canadian perspective, because we maybe similar to this part of Europe, we obviously lie north of a sleeping giant, right? A very large giant. You know, I was at MIT last week, and there's Princeton, and all these fantastic universities, and it becomes a little bit of a gravity well, if you will, right? For people think, oh, we should go to these amazing universities, but what is the defining innovation of, say, the last 20 years, 15 years? Most people would say, well, deep learning, right? It has changed the field. If you aren't working on deep learning, then you know, people are going to question what you're doing nowadays, right? You probably have work, and then you say, oh, we should at least look at deep learning. And where did deep learning come from? Well, it came from 2 Canadian universities. And why did it come from 2 Canadian universities? Well, Canada has a very different funding system from the way that we think about research from the United States. So while the United States has these massive peaks and massive troughs, as we all know, Canada has much more of, let's call it a more European, maybe I'm overstepping my knowledge here, but in my understanding, a more European system where we think about distributing the resources, right? And so that's why, you know, to the best of my understanding of these funding things, it's so important to make sure that all the boats rise equally, because Canada took a chance on Hinton, who's now famous, and Bengio, right, who have both won the Field Medal, to say this research is compelling, it's interesting, and we as a country will support it going forward. And I think that it's important to understand that it's not always the Princetons, the MITs, et cetera, that drive innovation, that it can be from a different model. And this is, once again, getting back to where universities and industries can collaborate. I think it's important to understand it's an ecosystem that we build that leads to true innovation, not just funding the superstars across the field. So.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very good idea that we should distribute a little bit more evenly. The second question to you, a little bit connected to this question, that what should be the role of the universities? So what do you need as an industry? Do you prefer the graduates who have directly applicable practical skills, or rather you would like to see a strong theoretical knowledge and background of the students, and that which is transferable, and you can build your own practical training on that?
So perhaps not surprisingly, based on my first answer, I want both, actually, and that's the that's the world we live in now, right? I mean, in the ICT space, right, things are hard, things are complicated, right, and we don't do ourselves a service if we push students one way or the other artificially, right? So I think it's absolutely essential that students come with both skills in the strong theory point of view, as well as the strong application. And there's certainly a drift now in the way that we're teaching students, that we're drifting more towards the data scientist side of things, right? Where we're asking them to download, go to the GitHub repository and learn this model, you know, apply it, and then, come up with some conclusions. And this is going to be a disservice in the long run if we don't dig deeper and train the staff of the future that helps us to understand these models. So I'm in a unique position because I lead a research lab inside of an industry. It's like, think of my staff as essentially a bunch of postdocs that work for me, right? And so we're given the space to explore and understand the world. So I as a workforce that I'm hiring, I absolutely need people with these critical theoretical knowledge, but with true hands-on experience. So I truly need both. As for the ways that we can collaborate, it's absolutely essential. I mean, I need the workforce that you guys provide, and there's no way that we can achieve that workforce if we don't work collaboratively to build it, right? Because we have the understanding of, or at least we believe we do. I'm just going to pretend we do. We have the understanding of where the world is going and why these problems are important, but universities often have more time to build the deep knowledge sets that are essential to solve the problems of the future. So.
Thank you very much. But sometimes it's really hard to explain to students that they need to learn this theoretical background and the knowledge that we want to teach them. And they always say that we want to go to the practice, we want to see live problems. So it would be also a great impulse from the industry to see that they need this knowledge from the students on the job market. So for Massimo, I have the second question for you. Do you see any change in the role of the universities in the new European research area?
Yes, if you allow me, I would like also to make a comment to the previous two interventions, because I think it was very interesting to hear the colleagues, and especially the 2 points. One on the aspect related, of course, to limited amount of funding for widening countries, which of course is one of the problems that has been somehow addressed by the Commission in Horizon Europe through an increased amount of money available for the widening budget. But, we are discussing about the industry strategy for Europe that is based also on the Green Deal and, let's say, the green transition or digital transition or twin transition that at the moment are very fashionable word in this context. What is interesting and what has happened in the last days, I don't know if you have noticed it, the Commission have announced an increase of budget in Horizon Europe that I think, if I remember correctly, is about 12.4 billion euros coming also from the Recovery Fund. I think that 5-something billion euros are going to increase the amount of money allocated for the just transition mechanism, which is a mechanism where universities can apply, even if you want, this is a facilitated fund for the countries that are affected by low carbon needed actions to achieve the carbon of Europe, so to accelerate and cover the gap, the technological gap that some widening countries has in terms greening their production processes and reducing the emissions related. But the just transition mechanism, and this links also with the comment made by the colleague from industry on your side, the just transition mechanism also foresee the possibility to fund specific actions to train the new profile of the workers for the future. So somehow I think these are good news, if you want, for the widening countries that have an extra amount of money that goes in that exactly in the direction also of the problems highlighted by the two colleagues in the room, and that, in my opinion, represent a very interesting aspect. Regarding your question on the European research area, there are several aspects today in the 20 points that the Commission has put as their strategies or their actions to achieve or to relaunch the European strategic area, research area. For the one who doesn't know, the European research area was started many years ago as a part of the Lisbon Agreement with the intent exactly to create a European research area per se, where the free circulation of researchers was facilitated, where basically a researcher could have worked in any country without too much of a let's say, administrative problems, no, tax payments, salaries, pension funds, etc., where a career for researcher was a bit unified at European level, and where joint actions for what we can define the United States of Europe would have been defined, like, for example, the creation of specific European research infrastructures that today are, if you want, a reality, and today are one of the elements that are even under discussion in a way to be relaunched, to be revised, to be refunded, or to be, let's say, increased in funding, which is another part that is very interesting. So again, the 20 actions of the European research area are definitely challenging for the university, because they call, first of all, for a modernization of the system with the need of the university, especially if you want the most traditional one, to start integrating in the way of generating knowledge, the vision about how this knowledge is going to impact and is going to somehow generate new innovation and advantages for the European industry. And this is one. On the other side, the relaunch of research infrastructures, where university, in most of the cases, are embedded. My university is, for example, involved in many research infrastructures, and in some cases, it's important. The alignment of the need to change the mentality of the university to a more innovative one passes also through what I anticipated in my previous intervention, the generation of a network of so-called European research, ERA hubs. The ERA hubs are basically the vision of the Commission to generate or to exploit the current existence at all regional and local levels of innovation clusters, providing them a European dimension, making them into a cluster of European dimension, and creating, if you want, exchange of knowledge, exchange of solutions, exchange of best practices from realities that at the moment are of course very focused at local level, that in most of the cases, and especially in widening countries, represent incredible excellencies because they are newly funded through structural funds. And so important to try to put this amount of resources that at the moment are exploited mostly at local level to a European dimension. This I see as being launched now. In the last set of calls, the European Commission have launched a call for piloting the definition of the governance model, but in the 2 years to come, this network will become reality and will call the local system where universities are central to somehow get together, generate polls that can enter in the European context. I see this as a very interesting challenge because it represents, in my opinion, a mental switch in many of the university toward a more innovation-oriented approach.
Thank you very much. Do you have any feedback on that? Would you like to reflect?
Yes, I think the Commission is taking some steps to set up these hubs, to set up teaming initiatives between widening and non-widening countries. So these are all going in the right direction. But where I would really like to see improvement is the actual projects in the clusters, in the industrial clusters, in the other areas where cooperation actually increases, there's more widening actors involved, not just one for the show, but maybe the university and the industry that they're working together anyway, so they can boost it and leverage it at a European level, what they're doing. So this is the kind of improvement I would really like to see in the framework program.
We have prepared some general questions to you. How can research projects funded under the Horizon Europe program have a real impact by meeting the European policy objectives in the key industry areas?
Yes, this impact issue is a question that many applicants are really struggling with, because the the way the Commission interprets impact has really changed from the previous program. Like now, they are really envisioning impact pathways that are leading up to the very top policy priorities. So they are asking projects to actually envision how their specific project outputs would lead to certain outcomes, which lead to cluster level expected impacts, which all feed into top high-level policy priorities. This is a useful exercise, certainly, to think wider than what the specific project is supposed to do, and to think about how you define your actual project outputs, that they really live beyond the project duration itself. How this is interpreted at the evaluation stage, what the best approach is to really show these impact pathways, well, it remains to be seen. We're at the very beginning, and I understand that applicants are really struggling. But I think if they go through this exercise and they think of the wider effects, wider impacts that their research will have, it will eventually lead to the benefits.
I don't have anything specific to add because I actually am not super familiar with the project. I apologize for that. But one of the things I think we do different in industry, which just to add to your point, does add a lot of value is, it's a cliche to start with the why, but if you ask my employees why they're working on something, and they're publishing at top venues, et cetera, they always know exactly why. And it's not a shallow why in the sense of, oh, we're going to make the world a better place or something, or, here's a, some, epsilon, George did it this, and we're going to do it epsilon better. They can tell you the pathway to success, the impact that they're going to have either through the company or, through reality, et cetera. And I think that starting with that why, or maybe not starting with it, but making sure that people understand why they're working on research leads to better research. And it goes back to what I said at the beginning, the idea that the most important work that we can do is stuff that intersects scientific interest and real world problems. Because the problem is on either side of the fence, it really isn't valuable to anyone, right? And why that's a problem is because in the middle are the key challenges that we absolutely need to go after as from a humanity point of view, right? Like climate change runs right down the middle. It's both scientifically incredibly hard, but human relevant. Building responsible AI systems is exactly in the middle there. It's both scientifically extremely hard, like for example, bias in models. We've seen all these horrible things, but also incredibly relevant for the things that we have to go after. And the things that kind of sit too far away from that middle line are just not important. And so I actually think, though everyone's struggling with it, that's what I see when I look outside in general, is people always struggle with why they're doing research, but forcing people and forcing students, once again, from the beginning to understand why they're doing something is unbelievably important.
Massimo?
Ready? I can hear you. Yeah.
Do you have any comment on this question or the previous comments?
On the impact, it's it's the nightmare of universities. I have to tell you that this represents one of the challenges in our community of professors to even understand how to interpret the impact. And again, sorry if I repeat the concept, but it's an understood problem at European level. The Commission is also working on it, and there is again an attempt for stimulating a so-called institutional change in the higher education institutions through the definition of specific acceleration services. There has been a call opened by the Commission now, pointing out the need to take the system to grow in a direction that fits the policies that the Commission is trying to pursue, and that we know are based on the fact that Europe is a very good producer of knowledge, but a very bad exploitator of the knowledge it produces, lagging behind other, if you want, competitors like US and Japan. The need to change this approach also passes through education of the current research system, trying to take the researchers to put in their mindset the way to generate impact out of the research, But the problem is how to explain the impact. So there are actions ongoing. If I have to look inside my university, we are also making specific courses to try to make our researchers and professors to look beyond the simple research activities, but look into how they can be transformed in impactful results for the European system. But definitely I agree that impact is at the moment a challenge for university, is less a challenge for a research and technology organization, which have it, if you want, more embedded in their mentality, because they are somehow by nature focused on higher TRL work. But it is arriving. In our case, I already noticed that our performance in collaborative projects, which are basically the area where you have to work on these aspects, is at the moment in a growing tendency, demonstrating that somehow internally this change is happening and that our professors start to recognize themselves more comfortable also in an area where normally they didn't consider them to be possibly participating.
Thank you. Related to the impact issue, I can confirm that also at our university we are struggling with that to interpret what is the real request and requirements by the Commission described in the course. So this could be enhanced for the future. But connected to your comments, what is the ratio of the results of these cooperations between university and industry which are really exploited and actually used in the practice? Do you know any approximate numbers or any ideas about that?
I don't think it's easy to measure, but certainly in typical research programs, some indicators are asked. Also in partnership programs, overall indicators for the duration of the partnership are asked, and these involve figures like number of protected results, number of spin-off companies, things like that. So they do measure. How this can be mapped to percentage of what's being done in the project itself is not so easy, because often the impact arrives years or even decades later, so after the research itself. But there is pressure to show this impact, and there is pressure for projects to define and measure and set targets and set the starting base numbers to really make the project work more targeted to achieving this impact.
Can I give an unpopular answer? I think the number is probably close to zero if you actually looked at it. And I think the question is actually the wrong question, and maybe this is why people are struggling with the impact question, because I think the right question is, how much of this research builds the future, right? How much does it build the students of the future? How much does it build the critical assets that we're going to build the real future on top of, right? And I think that's the more important question. And that number is closer to 100% if done correctly, right? If you build the right relationships with a professor that trains the student that comes to work for you, that is a critical asset that will build the differentiated products of the future, right? That will allow us to leverage and to solve the hard challenges down the road. So I think trying to figure out, because and we struggle with this inside, because I run, like I said, a research lab. The gap from us to products is big, and it's bigger than you think because of the hardening and the way that people think, and to transfer this across. So when we build incredibly disruptive things, we're rebuilding radios from the bottom up, right? Like completely rethinking how they're built using artificial intelligence, and it's changing the game. And then when we talk to the business units, the timelines, and I won't quote them here, make me upset, because the amount of work they need to do to get it there. But does that mean that what I did is, if you ask what's the immediate impact or the short-term impact, even for me, it's probably close to zero. But that's the wrong question. Once again, did I change the way that they think? Are they going to develop different products down the line? Absolutely. And then the impact that we have as a team, there's a reason why they pay us, right? Is because it's 100%, right? And so I think maybe it's a subtle change in the way you ask the question, but I think it's really the important thing is, are we building the future instead of product by impact? Because I think you'll fail more than you succeed. Sorry.
Yeah, but it's also hard to measure.
Yeah, impossible. Well, if you ask the wrong
Massimo?
Can I add? I agree it's difficult to measure, especially in European projects. It's basically quite impossible to understand if after the end of the project you have generated something. I would like to tell you a story by curiosity. In my life, I've done also the project manager of innovation-oriented projects, and long time ago, I coordinated a proposal where we were basically testing a technology to test the quality of cooking of the biscuits, an important biscuit producer in Italy. It was a collaboration between a Finnish company producing the system to see the biscuits, a university in Italy, which is University of Parma, to add intelligence in the loop, so to somehow fine-tune the oven to cook the biscuits, which was a 12 meters long oven with different levels of cooking, so to optimize the cooking and reduce the discard at the end. The project went well, the testing went very well, and at the end, a sort of prototype machine had been created. Then I've lost completely the traces, and after 6 years, I met again someone in the project, and they said, but by the way, how the story is finished? And he told me, you know what? Today there is a company in the north of Italy producing a device to quality control the cooking of biscuits and bread, and they're currently the provider of McDonald's to test the cooking of the bread. But it was by chance, you see. It's a very interesting outcome, because out of a European project you have generated a real impact, but you just know it by chance, and you cannot systematize this kind of collection of information unless somehow you oblige the project partners to report to the Commission for the 5 years after the end of the project, which is of course an impossible exercise to be done. I would like to also show appreciation for the comment from the industry, because I think it's one of the main important things. I mean, the industry and universities, in terms of helping university to generate the future workers, is something that is well known and well approached also in the European context. This is, for example, one of the main aim or one of the main activities of the KICS, of the European Institute of Technology. But there is also another aspect that I think should be taken into consideration to help in generating impact, which is the opening of the labs of the universities to the industries, especially the small and medium-sized ones, that normally do not have internally the capability or the financial possibilities to sustain the generation of research appliances to develop their products. This is also another thing that is growing inside universities, and that open laboratories is now a trend that is growing in the last 10-15 years. For example, in NTNU, we have an artificial intelligence, as we are discussing about the artificial intelligence lab that is kept open to companies to come, test their devices, exploit our students to develop new applications, organize hackathons to maybe find interesting solutions to be deployed to the industrial system in the future, and so on. So, to generate impact, these are definitely the things to be done, and to guarantee continuous impact, a continuous dialogue between companies and universities, and of course also research and technology organizations, need to be nurtured, continued, and why not, supported by the national systems.
Okay, thank you very much. And you mentioned the KICS, so what do you think about how efficient these KICS are working? Because they aim to facilitate the collaboration between universities and industries, and they are launched in different fields in the last years, and they are really getting lots of funding for that. So how do you think it's working well?
Yes, it's a good approach because it's a different approach. So I think the framework program changed quite a bit over the years, and the Commission and the Member States are open to new models. So for me, the KICS represent a new model of collaboration, and it's taken a few years to really ramp up the activities, but now they are there. And now there's a lot of activities going on, academia-industry collaboration, bringing in young students, education programs, so many activities surrounding those central hubs. But yeah, so it's a good way to move away from the traditional research funding.
And I also have a last question maybe for reflecting on the current situations which we all have lived with the pandemic, how much they have affected these cooperations and how it will change the European industry. Do you have any experience on that?
Like the effects of COVID? Or? Yeah, I think there's obviously been a change in the way that we think about work going forward, and I think that this can have an equalizing effect on research, right, and allowing to bring diverse skill sets in from a global economy now. I think many people are much more used to the idea of working remotely. I actually gave up my desk the other day because I manage people in 7, and I was like, well, I spend more time not in my office than in my office, so why am I going there in the first place, right? So I think it's changing the world, but I don't know if I have anything specific other than I think we're gonna struggle with the effects of what it means when everyone's working at home all the time now, but I think it will be a net positive.
Yeah, I think the positive effect is that it really brought up a whole bunch of new challenges and thinking about how the way the world works, what supply chains should be adjusted and how. So these kind of issues really, I think, bring new opportunities for research and innovation.
Thank you. Massimo? Maybe we lost him. And in general, what do you think is the role of the research and innovation in eliminating European strategic dependencies? Or maybe we have Massimo. Yes. Massimo, what do you think about the effects on the pandemic on the work and cooperation between university and industry?
Yeah, I have heard the question. Sorry, I had a moment of lag of line, so I haven't catch the last answer. But adding on my side, well, the pandemic has, of course, created strugglings. Not in my job, if you want, because it's a job of relationship and it's a job of alignment on views and so on. Somehow, if you want, it made it worse because of the amount of meetings that increased dramatically on my computer without any element of pause, that I suspect has been an effect that everyone has lived, especially in the first period of the pandemic. I think that in terms of collaboration between research entities and companies, there the impact has been sensible. I mean, if I have to understand, for example, the problems that many of our students having applied activities needed to access the labs had during the acute period of pandemic, where the access and the possibility to interact with each other was limited. I think, of course, it has impacted negatively to the system. We are, of course, very keen. I mean, digital technologies are fantastic. I'm traveling at the moment in the middle of Switzerland and I'm with you virtually in Hungary. So there are positive effects, but I think that we are still needing physical and real interaction. So I hope, and I cross my fingers, that we will continue as we are now, with the possibility to exploit digital technologies for doing things like we are doing now, but continuing to have real interactions for the benefit of more proactive and fruitful collaborations.
Okay, thank you very much. It was a really nice closing word, I believe. So we have discussed lots of issues, and hopefully we have a more clear picture how research and industry can collaborate, what can we expect from the different funding opportunities, and how we can further explore this collaboration to have a brighter future. So thank you very much for all the panelists, and we will go to the next program point.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.